الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد النبي المجاهد الشهيد وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واهلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. In Surah Ankabut, verse 45, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala states, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنْكَرِ. That certainly, Salah, the prayers, they prevent evil and they prevent indecency. Now, as is common within the Arabic language, when a word is assigned to a certain thing, whether it be an object, an item, an action, a place, there tends to be a reason behind that. One of those words is Salah. Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin rahimahullah ta'ala, in his book As-Salah fil Islam, he mentions 5 potential mushtaqat for the word Salah, meaning that the word Salah can be derived from any of these 5. And we shall go through just a few of them. The first, which Shaykh Abdullah rahimahullah mentions, he says that As-Salah is derived from At-Tasliyah. And he says this means At-Taqweem, meaning to adjust something, to rectify something. And to support this opinion, he uses the statement Sallaytul Awda bin Nar, meaning I straightened or I rectified the wood using the fire. So just as a crooked piece of wood is straightened, is rectified by the fire, the Salah, it rectifies the believer. It straightens the believer of any crookedness found within him. This is one reason. The second, which Shaykh Abdullah rahimahullah gives, he says that as-salah is derived from as-sila, which means connection. The reason being is that the prayers, what they do, they connect the person to his Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. But in the circumstance, the unfortunate circumstance, where the believer does not offer the 5 daily prayers, and this connection is either severed or does not exist. Now Shaykh Abdullah rahimahullah also mentions a hadith under this second point, where he says, it is narrated from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, as is found in the Sahih of Imam Muslim rahimahullah, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, بين الرجل وبين الشرك والكفر ترك الصلاة. That between a man and between polytheism and disbelief is the abandoning of Salah. So by abandoning Salah, the connection between the believer and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is cut off. Now Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin rahimahullah ta'ala, in this very same book, he mentions an aspect of Salah which I think many of us commonly overlook. So he says that Salah has spiritual, physical, intellectual and emotional effects. Now these effects, they manifest, they make themselves apparent both in this life and in the next. Not just in the next life, but also in this life. And in the worldly realm, in this dunya, he says that these effects appear in both physical and emotional states. Now this is something which we very commonly overlook. One of the most simplest of things. Now a person can object and he can say that this isn't overlooked by people. We understand this, something very well known to all of us. The reply to this would then be, if this is something well known to us, we've heard it before many times, then it's not been understood. Meaning we've heard it, it's come through one ear and it's gone out the other. Because if we had truly understood such a statement, why is it that whenever a calamity befalls us, whether minor, whether major, we turn to hundreds of other things, yet Salah we don't even give it a moment's thought. Any one of us, if we complain of being unable to find a routine in our daily lives, we struggle with timekeeping. What do? The very first thing we do is we'll take out our smartphone, we'll go to YouTube, we'll type in easiest daily routine to follow, best daily routine to follow. And what do they tell us? They set out a whole load of unrealistic goals. Wake up at 4 a.m, go for a cold plunge, go for a 6-mile jog. The whole day is set out like this, unrealistically. But the believer in this situation, if we had truly understood such a statement, which Shaykh Abdullah mentioned, we would firstly turn to our Salah. We would know that the Salah is spread out throughout the entire day. It's a perfect base. We can build our day around the Salah, upon the 5 daily prayers. Another example, many of us, we complain that, Shaykh, I'm struggling with a lack of spirituality. I don't feel any spirituality. What does the person do? He looks for various awrad. He looks for various tips and tricks on social media. But in reality, he's going to find something that only pleases his nafs. Whereas, if we indeed wanted to find true spirituality, then that would be the 5 daily prayers. Because we know that, as Shaykh Abdullah mentioned, it has many benefits in this world and in the next. And it will also be made apparent physically and both emotionally in this world. Now, returning back to the ayah of Surah Al-Ankabut, in the tafsir of this ayah, Imam Qurtubi rahimahullah ta'ala, he explains to us that the way in which Salah prevents a person from fahsha and munkar. So he mentions 2 points. When they're both combined, he says that a person is able to refrain from evil acts and indecent acts. The first thing he says is that this is achieved through the recitation of the Quran, meaning when he recites the Quran or when it is recited, he comes across various warnings from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when he ponders upon these warnings, he is able to, when combined with the second point, he's able to achieve such a state which allows him to avoid sinning. The second point which Imam Qurtubi mentions, he says that such a state is achieved through one humbling himself and submitting to his Lord subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that when he stands for prayer, he remembers that he is standing in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is observing and is aware of each and every single thought going through his mind. When he thinks in such a manner, he finds that the soul begins to correct itself. That the soul becomes humble in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then he finds that fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins to fill his heart. And due to this, an awe becomes apparent on his limbs. Now this state that the person is able to attain, it stays with him until after the salah also. Now as this state begins to slowly diminish, it is met by the second salah. And when it is prayed in such a state, as mentioned, it brings the state back to where it was when it was first achieved by the person in salah. Now in this very same passage, interestingly, Imam Qurtubi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions something. He mentions it in 2 lines, right at the end, as if he is indicating that if what I've mentioned is not something that's working for you, then this should be more than enough of a warning. And he mentions and he says that death is more than enough of a reminder for you. For death has no specific year. It has no specific month. It has no set day. And within that day it does not have a set time. He said that you pray that Salah as if it is your last. If this, the person is able to think such, then this will no doubt allow him to reach that state, which then allows him to avoid munkar and fahsha. Now, person can also then say, we see many people day in, day out. We see them praying, and when they pray, it's the best of manners. We're impressed by it. But then when we see that very same person later on we see engaging in acts of sin, the answer to this is found in narration mentioned by Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal, Imam Ibn Hibban, Imam al-Bayhaqi, rahimahullah ta'ala, may Allah be pleased with all of them. In this narration is narrated from Sayyidina Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu, that a man came to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and he said, Fulan yusalli fil layl, so-and-so prays in the night. فَإِذَا أَصْبَحَ سَرَقَ. But when it is the day, the man steals. He's a thief by day. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam replied and said, سَيَنْهَاهُ مَا تَقُولُ. That what you have said shall soon stop. Shaykh Abdullah Sirajudi rahimahullah ta'ala explains this statement from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he says what is meant by this is that the Salah which he prays shall one day stop him from committing the sin which he is carrying out. The barakah, the blessing of the Salah is such that if he is engaged in haramat, in various acts of haram, then the barakah of the Salah shall lead to abandoning those acts. As is mentioned, إِنَّ الصَّلَاةَ تَنْهَى عَنِ الْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ. That certainly the Salah, it helps one avoid fahsha and munkar. Now this is something also mentioned by Imam Ibn Kathir rahimahullah ta'ala in his tafsir. If a person continuously offers his salah, insists in offering his salah, then the outcome of this is that eventually leads to that individual being able to avoid fahsha and munkar. That it allows them to be able to avoid evil acts and moral indecent acts. Now, an example perhaps just makes it easier to understand is actually given by Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala. He gives an example of a commoner. Now this commoner has no connection to the king of the land. And the commoner as such then, he doesn't see it necessary that he concerns himself with refined behavior, that he be a person of good manners. But if this commoner, either through a job or another means, finds himself close to the king, that he's an advisor, a soldier, a guard, etc. He knows that this status of his demands that he avoids certain things. Similarly, the Tulaab, the servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as he begins to offer his prayer through his prostration to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he has a connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has a status. He is connected to the Lord of all the worlds. And he knows that through my connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, certain things are required of me. And I am commanded to avoid certain things. And he begins to develop a sense of honor. And he begins to slowly avoid these sins. That is what Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala likens the servant to. That the commoner, just a normal person, had no need. But when he was connected to such an individual, he had to change the way he acts. The believer, as he began to pray, and he was connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he knew that it was necessary for him to avoid haram acts, to avoid sinning. Now Imam Fakhruddin al-Razi rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions further, that with repeated prayer, devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he finds that his spiritual rank begins to increase. And as his spiritual rank begins to increase, he finds that he is able to shun minor sins, let alone major sins. This is the barakah that a person receives through offering the 5 daily prayers. Now, we're human, we make mistakes, we get caught up in the dunya. We end up missing our salah. But we should make today a different day. Our coming to this masjid, not like all the previous occasions that we have in our life, where we've come to the masjid, it comes in through our ear, leaves out through the other ear. Me, myself included, we should make today this day, that we make a firm intention here in the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that if we are lacking in our 5 daily prayers, if we are not punctual, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we also make the firm intention that from today on forth, we shall never leave or abandon any of the 5 daily prayers. If we are punctual in our prayers, then we should try to offer them with the presence of the heart and presence of the mind. That is the goal that we should make. Because if, for example, me, myself included, some of us at college, university, work, what differentiates us between us and the kuffar, the disbelievers? The first thing that comes to my mind, something which has come across my mind before as well, is the believer, when he needs to, he'll get up, he'll go, he'll take time out, and he'll offer his salah. That is one of the main differences between us and the disbelievers. It's something which I've observed at my workplace. We all wear the same clothing. Okay, we may not look the same, but in our actions, what differentiates us is that we are able to sacrifice a period of time throughout our day. In the cold, we are able to go perform ablution, set time aside and offer and pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this prayer of ours is not something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in need of. It is something that we are in need of. Without the 5 daily prayers, you will notice, or you may have noticed in the past, that certain things aren't going as they should. But when you are able to bring yourself back to the 5 daily prayers, you notice that there are openings, various openings, and things are made easier to you. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to firstly grant us all the ability to perform the 5 daily prayers, to grant us ikhlas, sincerity in the offering of these 5 daily prayers. And also to the students here present, a book which I've referred to throughout the preparation is As-Salah fil Islam by Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin rahimahullah ta'ala. This is a very easy book to understand. This is a must read for all students. If you don't have this book, purchase it and read it. If you have it, I assume you would have read it if you know Shaykh Abdullah Sirajuddin rahimahullah ta'ala. This book covers many aspects of salah. And many aspects throughout this book which I've had to leave behind. I advise you to read this book, cover to cover. And no doubt you'll find that your love for salah is rekindled. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us steadfastness upon the teachings of the Quran and the Sunnah. Ameen. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wa salamun ala al-mursaleen walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.